The rain didn't just fall, it assaulted the city of Boston, turning the evening streets into a slick black mirror of neon and despair. For Lucy and Darcy, it was just another Tuesday. Another 12-hour shift followed by the bone-deep ache of her second job. As she wrestled a sodden cardboard box, overflowing with restaurant supplies from the curb to the diner's back alley, her arms screamed in protest. The box slipped its corner, digging into her ribs. She was invisible, just another shadow in a rain-soaked alley, fighting a battle no one saw. But someone did see. From the dry, silent sanctuary of his Bentley, Declan Rhodes watched her. He saw the grim set of her jaw, the tremor in her arms, and in her exhaustion, he saw a ghost from his own past he could no longer ignore. The engine of the Bentley Mulsanne purred so softly, it was little more than a vibration felt through the butter-soft leather. Outside the world was a cacophony, a relentless drumming of rain on the roof, the hiss of tires on wet asphalt, the distant wail of a siren. Inside there was only silence, and Declan Rhodes. He wasn't supposed to be here in this gritty back alley behind a third-rate diner called O'Malley's. He was supposed to be at a gala, shaking hands, smiling a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and celebrating the groundbreaking of his latest monolithic achievement, the Phoenix Towers, a testament to luxury and urban renewal that would scrape the Boston skyline. His driver, a stoic man named Peterson, had taken a detour to avoid a traffic snarl, and that's when he saw her. The woman he'd later learn her name was Lucienne, was a study in dogged determination. She was drenched. Her thin waitress uniform, a faded blue that might have once been cheerful, was plastered to her frame. Her ponytail had surrendered to the humidity-dark strands, clinging to her face as she fought with a box that was clearly too heavy for her. It wasn't one box, it was a stack of them, piled precariously on a dolly with one wobbly wheel. She'd managed to get two inside and was now on her third. Declan watched his fingers steepled a familiar tightness in his chest. He saw not just a struggling waitress, but a reflection. He saw his mother 30 years ago, hauling laundry baskets for wealthy families in a neighborhood, not unlike the one he was now planning to raise and rebuild. He remembered the permanent weariness in her eyes, the raw, chapped skin of her hands, the way she'd flinch when he tried to help, insisting it was her burden to carry. She had worked herself into an early grave, so he could have a chance he had seized and multiplied 1,000-fold. And what had it made him, a man who lived in a sterile penthouse, who measured success in square footage and profit margins, who hadn't felt the sting of rain on his face in years? A man whose company Rhodes Development was praised in financial journals for its ruthless efficiency. Lucienne grunted, her sneaker slipping on a patch of slick grime. The box tilted violently. For a moment, Declan's hand went to the door handle, an instinct he hadn't felt in decades. Help her. But what would he do? A stranger in a $500,000 car stepping out to offer help. She would be suspicious, scared even. The chasm between their worlds was too vast to cross in a rain-drenched alley. She righted the box, her breath fogging in the damp air. With a final desperate shove, she wrestled it through the restaurant's back door and disappeared inside. The alley was empty again, save for the relentless rain washing over the discarded remnants of the city's day. Peterson Declan said, his voice quiet but firm, breaking the car's hermetic seal of silence. So find out everything you can about the women who work at that diner, specifically the one with the dark hair just now in the alley. Right away, Mr. Rhodes. Declan leaned back against the headrest. The image of her strained face burned into his mind. He wasn't a philanthropist. Charity to him was a tax strategy, a public relations tool managed by a team of professionals. This felt different. This was personal. It was a debt not of money, but of memory. A debt owed to the ghost of a woman who carried heavy burdens, so her son wouldn't have to. He didn't know what he was going to do yet, but he knew he couldn't simply drive away and let the memory fade. For the first time in a very long time, Declan Rhodes felt the pull of an obligation that had nothing to do with a contract or a bottom line. The leak in the ceiling had started a family. A small brown stain had grown into a sprawling continent-shaped blight on the popcorn texture above the sofa, where Lucienne's younger brother, Leo, slept. Every drip into the plastic bucket on the floor was a metronome, counting down the seconds to their eviction. "It's getting worse," Leo said, his voice raspy. He was only 17, but a chronic respiratory condition made him sound older, and the damp, musty air of their tiny apartment was his constant enemy. He coughed a dry, rattling sound that made Lucienne's heart clench. "I know, Leo. I talked to Mr. Henderson again yesterday. He said he's on it." It was a lie. Their landlord, Mr. Henderson, was a tired old man being squeezed by the new corporation that had bought the building. He had no power, no money for repairs, and no answers. All he had were eviction notices, which he handed out with an apologetic shrug. Theirs was due in 3 weeks. Lucienne limped to the small kitchenette, her entire body a symphony of aches from the previous night. She spooned instant coffee into 2 chipped mugs. It was all they could afford. She was juggling the diner, the stocking gig, and occasional weekend cleaning jobs, and they were still sinking. The weight wasn't in the boxes anymore. It was in her chest, heavy and suffocating. A sharp rap on the door made them both jump. It was too early for Mr. Henderson. Lucienne cautiously peered through the peephole. A courier clad in a sleek black uniform she didn't recognize stood impatiently in the dingy hallway. She opened the door a crack. "Can I help you package for Lucienne Darcy?" he said, not looking at her, already consulting his tablet. He held out a crisp, heavy-stock ivory envelope. No return address. Just her name, elegantly printed in a deep blue ink. She signed for it, her hand unsteady. Inside the apartment, she turned the expensive paper over and over. It felt alien in her world of flimsy bills and threatening letters from collection agencies. "What is it?" Leo asked, pushing himself up on the couch. "I have no idea." With trembling fingers, she broke the wax seal, a simple, stylized R. Inside there was no letter, no explanation, just a single gleaming silver key attached to a fob and a thick card. On the card was an address, the Argent 1500, Seaport Boulevard, Penthouse B. Lucienne stared at it. It had to be a mistake, a cruel joke. The Argent was one of the newest, most luxurious residential buildings in Boston, a place where apartments didn't have rent. They had price tags with 7 or 8 zeros, a place that existed in a different universe. Seaport Boulevard, Leo said, his eyes wide. "Isn't that—" "It's a mistake," Lucienne said quickly, her voice sharp with a fear she didn't understand. "Someone with my name must have ordered something. I'll have to return it." But how there was no sender, no contact information, just the key and the address. For the rest of the morning, the key sat on their small, wobbly table, a silent, silver enigma. It mocked her with its possibility. Lucienne tried to ignore it, tried to focus on her online search for a new, impossibly cheap apartment, but her eyes kept drifting back to it. By noon, the curiosity had curdled into a desperate, illogical hope. The drip from the ceiling seemed to grow louder. Leo had another coughing fit. "We should just go," Leo said, his voice barely a whisper. "Just to see. What's the worst that could happen?" The worst that could happen was humiliation. Security guards laughing them out, being mistaken for thieves. But then she looked at her brother's pale face, at the water stain spreading above his head, and she knew the worst was already happening right here in this room. "Okay," she said, the word feeling foreign on her tongue. "Okay, Leo. Let's go." She slipped the key into the pocket of her worn jacket, its weight both terrifying and thrilling. It felt like holding a lightning bolt. It could be a mistake, a prank, a disaster. Or it could be an answer to a prayer she'd long since forgotten how to make. The taxi ride from their crumbling neighborhood to the seaport district was like traveling between dimensions. The landscape morphed from tired brick and graffiti-scarred walls to gleaming towers of glass and steel that pierced the clouds. The Argent rose above them all, a blade of architectural perfection. Lucienne paid the driver with most of her remaining cash, her hands clammy. Standing before the building's massive revolving doors, she felt an overwhelming urge to turn and run. She and Leo, in their worn jeans and faded coats, looked like lost pigeons that had wandered into a swan sanctuary. Taking a deep breath, she pushed Leo's wheelchair forward. The lobby was vast and cathedral-like, all white marble soaring ceilings and abstract art that probably cost more than their old apartment building. A woman with a sleek blonde bob and an impeccably tailored suit sat behind a large concierge desk. Her smile was polished and professional, but her eyes did a quick, dismissive sweep of their appearance. "May I help you?" she asked, her tone dripping with polite skepticism. This was it. The moment of humiliation. Lucienne's mouth went dry. She fumbled in her pocket and produced the key, placing it on the marble countertop. "We received this," Lucienne stammered. "I think it might be a mistake. It's for Penthouse B." The concierge's expression didn't change, but a flicker of something surprise recognition passed through her eyes. She picked up the key fob, her perfectly manicured finger, tapping it against a scanner on her desk. A green light blinked. Her professional smile returned, but this time it seemed genuine. "No mistake at all, Miss Darcy. Welcome to the Argent. Your residency agreement has been fully executed, and the first 3 years are paid in full. All utilities and building fees are included." Lucienne felt the floor drop out from under her. She grabbed the back of Leo's wheelchair for support. Paid by who there must be some misunderstanding. The arrangements were made by a private benefactor who wishes to remain anonymous. The concierge whose nameplate read. Miss Albright explained smoothly. "We were instructed to expect you. Your belongings from your old address are scheduled to be moved tomorrow morning by our preferred relocation service. All expenses covered, of course. Shall I show you to the penthouse?" Lucienne could only nod her mind, a maelstrom of confusion and disbelief. An anonymous benefactor, 3 years paid in full. It felt like a dream, the kind you wake up from with the bitter taste of reality in your mouth. Miss Albright led them to a private elevator that whisked them upwards in whisper-quiet silence. The doors opened directly into Penthouse B, and Lucienne forgot how to breathe. It wasn't an apartment. It was a sky-born estate. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire space, offering a breathtaking 270-degree panorama of the Boston Harbor and the city skyline. Sunlight, pure and unfiltered, poured in, illuminating the polished hardwood floors and the minimalist, tastefully furnished living area. The air was clean, fresh, and circulated by a silent, state-of-the-art filtration system. Leo wheeled himself forward, his mouth agape. He took a deep breath, then another. "Lucienne," he whispered, his voice filled with a wonder she hadn't heard in years. "The air. I can breathe." That one sentence shattered the last of Lucienne's composure. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and sudden. For years, her life had been a frantic, desperate fight to keep Leo healthy in an environment that was actively poisoning him. And now, in this palace of glass and light, he could simply breathe. They explored the rest of the space. There were 2 bedrooms each with its own en-suite bathroom that looked like a 5-star spa. The kitchen was a chef's dream of stainless steel and granite. A door led out to a private terrace with planters already filled with green shrubs. In the master bedroom, on a king-sized bed with a thread count she couldn't even imagine was another envelope. This one contained a debit card and a simple typed note for a fresh start. Use this for food, clothes, and anything else you and your brother might need. Focus on what matters. There was no signature. The balance on the card, which she checked on the brand new laptop already set up on a desk, contained a figure that made her feel faint. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life. That night, for the first time in years, Lucienne didn't sleep on a lumpy mattress with the sound of dripping water and her brother's coughing. She slept in a cocoon of soft linen, in a room so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. Leo slept soundly in the next room, his breathing even and clear. It was perfect. A miracle. A fairy tale. But as she lay there watching the city lights twinkle like a fallen constellation outside her window, a single unsettling question echoed in the silent, beautiful space. Who, and more importantly, why miracles like this didn't just happen. They always came with a price. She just didn't know what it was yet. Life changed in 1,000 small ways. The constant grinding anxiety that had been Lucienne's shadow for years began to recede. Leo's health improved dramatically. The dark circles under his eyes faded, replaced by the healthy glow of a teenager who was finally getting enough oxygen. He enrolled in online courses, his sharp mind no longer clouded by illness and fatigue. Lucienne quit her stocking and cleaning jobs, focusing solely on her shifts at O'Malley's, not because she needed the money, but because it was the one piece of her old life that felt real. A tether to the person she was before the miracle. She used the debit card sparingly, buying Leo new clothes, a better laptop for his studies, and fresh, healthy food instead of the cheap, processed staples they'd survived on. She paid off her mother's lingering medical debts. For herself, she bought only one thing, a sturdy, waterproof pair of work shoes. The mystery of her benefactor remained a constant low hum in the back of her mind. Who would do this? And why would they insist on anonymity? It felt too good to be true, and she lived with a quiet fear that it could all be snatched away as quickly as it had been given. About a month after the move, a new customer started coming into O'Malley's. He was tall, with sharp, intelligent eyes, and a quiet intensity that set him apart from the usual lunch crowd of construction workers and office clerks. He always sat at the same booth in her section, ordered black coffee and a BLT, and read the Wall Street Journal. He was handsome in a way that seemed both powerful and weary. His suits were impeccably tailored, a stark contrast to the diner's worn vinyl seats. His name, he said, was Declan. "You're new here," Lucienne noted one afternoon, refilling his coffee. "Just working on a project nearby," he replied, his gaze lifting from the newspaper. His eyes were a startling shade of grey, and they seemed to see more than she was comfortable with. "This place has character. That's one word for it," she said with a small smile. "Sticky is another." He laughed, a genuine warm sound that surprised her. They fell into an easy rhythm. He'd come in 3 or 4 times a week. They'd talk about the city, about books, about the ridiculously terrible music the diner owner insisted on playing. He never asked about her personal life, and she never offered. He was just Declan, a pleasant, intriguing fixture in her workday. There was an undeniable chemistry between them, a spark of connection that was both exciting and terrifying. He was a glimpse into a world she knew nothing about, but he seemed more grounded, more real than the sterile luxury she went home to every night. Meanwhile, their old life was being systematically erased. The day their belongings were moved, Lucienne had packed a small box of sentimental items herself, photos of her parents, a few of her mother's books, and some of Leo's old drawings. Tucked in the bottom was a folder of old papers she hadn't had the heart to throw away, lease agreements, medical bills, and the final formal eviction notice for their old apartment. One evening, Leo was working on a school project about urban development in Boston. Using the high-speed internet that was still a novelty, he was researching the boom in the Seaport district. "Hey, Lucienne, come look at this," he called from the living room. He pointed to his screen an article from a major architecture magazine. It featured a glowing profile on the Argent. It says here the primary developer and owner of our building is a company called Rhodes Development. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but Lucienne couldn't place it. Okay, so I got curious. Leo continued, clicking through tabs. I looked them up. They're massive. They're buying up property all over the city. They're the ones building the new Phoenix Towers downtown. He paused, his expression growing serious. And Lucienne, they were the ones who bought our old building on Elm Street. A cold dread washed over Lucienne. What are you talking about? I found the public property records. Rhodes Development bought the whole block 6 months ago. They're the ones who issued the eviction notices. Suddenly, Lucienne felt sick. She ran to the spare room where she'd stored the box of old papers. Her hands shook as she dug through the folder until she found it, the crisp corporate letterhead, the final notice to vacate. And there it was at the bottom of the page, in stark, unforgiving print. Rhodes Development LLC. The pieces crashed together in her mind with the force of a physical blow. Rhodes Development, the stylized R on the wax seal of the envelope, the anonymous benefactor. Her benefactor and her evictor were the same person. Her mind raced back to the man in the diner, Declan. What were the chances a man involved in a project nearby? A man whose quiet power always seemed to hint at something more. With a sense of mounting horror, she opened the laptop and typed Rhodes Development CEO into the search bar. The screen filled with images of him, the man from the diner. Declan. Except his full name wasn't just Declan. It was Declan Rhodes. The world tilted on its axis. The kindness she had been so grateful for was a lie. The miracle was a transaction. He hadn't saved her. He had bought her. He had destroyed her home with one hand and given her a gilded cage with the other. The conversations, the smiles, the easy rapport at the diner, was it all a charade? Was he checking up on his investment, making sure the displaced girl was content in her expensive prison? The air she had been so thankful for suddenly felt thin and recycled. The beautiful view from the window felt like the bars of a cell. Betrayal, hot and bitter, rose in her throat. He hadn't seen her. He'd just cleared a problem off his balance sheet. The next day, Lucienne didn't go to work. She called in sick, something she hadn't done in years. Her mind was a tempest of anger and humiliation. Every moment of relief she'd felt over the past month now seemed like a naive folly. Every time she'd looked at Leo's healthy, happy face, she'd been thanking the very man who had put them on the street. She paced the length of the penthouse, the polished floor feeling cold and hard beneath her feet. This beautiful home was not a gift. It was conscience money. Guilt payment. It was the price of her silence, a luxurious hush fund to ensure one family's sob story didn't tarnish the gleaming reputation of Rhodes Development. Leo watched her, his expression worried. "Lucienne, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to give it back," she said, her voice a low, furious tremor. She grabbed the key fob from the counter and the debit card from her wallet. All of it. But my school, my breathing. Leo's voice was small, laced with fear. The words were a knife in her gut. He was right. Declan Rhodes hadn't just given her a home. He had given her brother his health back. He had her trapped. The thought only fueled her rage. This was the true nature of his power, the ability to make you grateful for the cage he built for you. He won't take that away, Leo. He can't. But he needs to know that I'm not for sale. She dressed not in her waitress uniform, but in the nicest pair of jeans she owned, and a simple black sweater. She needed to look him in the eye, not as a charity case, but as an equal. She took a bus to the financial district, refusing to use the benefactor's money for a taxi. The Rhodes Development Headquarters was a skyscraper that seemed to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it. It was an imposing monument to power and capital. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she walked into the lobby, which was even more intimidating than the one at the Argent. "I'm here to see Declan Rhodes," she told the receptionist, her voice steadier than she felt. The woman eyed her with practiced disdain. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Lucienne said, placing the key fob and debit card on the marble desk. "But I believe he'll want to see me. Tell him Lucienne Darcy is here to return his property." The receptionist's eyebrows shot up. She spoke quietly into her headset. A moment later, a severe-looking woman in a charcoal power suit emerged from an elevator. This was Genevieve Dubois Declan's COO, though Lucienne didn't know it at the time. "Miss Darcy, Mr. Rhodes is in a meeting. Perhaps I can assist you." Genevieve's smile was a thin, bloodless line. "I'll wait," Lucienne said, crossing her arms. She didn't have to wait long. Minutes later, the elevator doors opened again, and Declan Rhodes stepped out. He wasn't wearing one of his casual diner suits. He was in full corporate armor, a dark, perfectly fitted suit, a crisp white shirt, a silk tie. When he saw her, his expression morphed from confusion to a dawning, horrified understanding. "Lucienne," he began, taking a step toward her. "What are you doing here, returning your things?" she said, her voice loud enough to carry across the hushed lobby. She pushed the key and the card across the reception desk toward him. They skittered across the polished marble. "I believe these belong to you." He flinched as if she'd struck him. Genevieve watched the exchange, her eyes narrowed with cold calculation. "Can we please talk about this somewhere private?" He pleaded, his voice low. "Why are you ashamed?" Lucienne's voice cracked with emotion. "You should be. Did you enjoy your little experiment, Mr. Rhodes? Coming to the diner to see if the charity case was behaving? To make sure I was properly grateful for the scraps you threw me after your company decided my home, my life, was in the way of your next big project?" Declan looked genuinely stunned. "My company, your home. What are you talking about? Don't lie to me." She shot back, tears of fury blurring her vision. "My old building on Elm Street. The eviction notice had your company's name all over it. Rhodes Development. So what was this? Did you pick my name out of a hat of all the people you were making homeless? Or was I just a special project?" The color drained from Declan's face. He looked from Lucienne to Genevieve, a dawning horror in his eyes. He had known his company was acquiring property for the Phoenix Towers project, of course. But he operated at 30,000 feet, looking at spreadsheets and zoning maps, not at the individual lives he was uprooting. He had never made the connection. "The Elm Street acquisitions," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He turned to Genevieve. Was she on that list? Genevieve's expression was unreadable. All relocations from the Phoenix footprint were handled according to protocol, Declan. He ignored her, his full attention on Lucienne. "I swear to you, I didn't know," he said, his voice raw with sincerity. "When I saw you in that alley, I didn't know who you were or where you lived. I saw someone who reminded me of my mother. I just wanted to help." "Help," Lucienne laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You call this help? You bulldoze a person's life and then offer them a penthouse. That's not helping. That's just cleaning up your own mess with a golden broom. I don't want your guilt. I don't want your gilded cage." She turned and walked toward the revolving doors, her back straight, leaving the key and the card sitting on the desk between a stunned billionaire and his calculating COO. "Lucienne, wait," Declan called after her. But she didn't stop. She pushed through the doors and out into the anonymous city streets, the weight of a false miracle finally lifted, replaced by the crushing, terrifying weight of an uncertain future. Declan stood frozen in the pristine, silent lobby, the echo of Lucienne's accusation. Was I just a special project ricocheting in his mind? The revolving doors hissed shut, cutting him off from the grey city street she had vanished into. For the first time in his adult life, Declan Rhodes, a man who commanded boardrooms and reshaped skylines, felt utterly powerless. He was the architect of his own disgrace, a villain who hadn't even known he was committing a crime. He turned his face, a mask of cold fury that sent a chill through the usually unflappable reception staff. He looked at Genevieve, who was watching him with a calm, almost clinical detachment. "My office," he commanded, his voice a low growl. "Get me the full acquisition and relocation file for the Elm Street block. Every resident, every notice, every memo, every complaint. I want the entire paper trail on my desk in 5 minutes." The walk to the elevator, a journey he made a dozen times a day, felt like a mile-long march of shame. The gleaming marble floors seemed to accuse him. The portraits of his past triumphant projects lining the walls felt like monuments to his own ignorance. He had built an empire of glass and steel, but its foundations were rotten with a callousness he had allowed, even encouraged, in the name of progress and profit. In the sterile quiet of his penthouse office, the city of Boston, sprawling beneath him, like a map of his own conquests, the files arrived. They were delivered by a nervous junior executive who placed them on Declan's vast mahogany desk and fled as if escaping a predator's den. The files were thick, bound in cold corporate blue. He opened the first one. It was exactly as he'd expected, a dispassionate collection of legal notices, buyout offers, calculated to the lowest defensible cent, and timelines that prioritized demolition schedules over human dignity. He scanned the names, each one, a life, a family reduced to a case number. Then he found it a subfolder for Lucienne's building. He flipped it open, and the sickness in his stomach intensified. He saw scanned copies of handwritten repair requests from tenants, including Lucienne, detailing the spreading mold and the leaking roof. Beside each one was a stamped, formulaic response from the property management subsidiary: request, received, and under review, a corporate euphemism for being thrown in the trash. He saw an internal memo signed by Genevieve recommending against any non-essential repairs to the recently acquired building to avoid sunk costs prior to demolition. They hadn't just evicted these people. They had knowingly left them to live in squalor. And there, on a final tenant roster, was her name, Lucienne Darcy. A single line item. An obstacle that had been efficiently cleared. The image of her fighting with that rain-soaked box, her face a portrait of sheer grit, slammed into the cold bureaucratic text. He felt a wave of self-loathing so profound it almost buckled his knees. He had been so proud of his anonymous grand gesture, seeing himself as a benevolent god descending from the heavens. In reality, he was just an arsonist trying to buy his way out of the crime by offering one of his victims a fireproof blanket. He grabbed the file and stormed out of his office, not waiting for the elevator but taking the internal staircase down one flight to the COO's office. Genevieve's space was an extension of herself, minimalist, impeccably organized and cold. She was on a call, but her eyes followed him as he crossed the room and slammed the thick folder down on her glass desk. The sound cracked through the office's hushed atmosphere. "This is your protocol," he demanded, his voice shaking with a controlled rage. "This is how Rhodes Development treats people. We buy their homes, ignore their pleas for basic sanitation, and then throw them out on the street with a pittance." Genevieve finished her call with a calm, "I'll have to call you back," and placed the receiver down gently. She rose from her chair, a picture of icy composure. It's how Rhodes Development became the most successful development firm in the country, Declan. We followed every law. We met every legal requirement for notice and compensation. We didn't get here by running a charity. A charity, Genevieve, look at this. He stabbed a finger at a complaint about the mold. We left a 17-year-old kid with a respiratory condition to breathe this in for months. This isn't business. It's barbarism. It's risk management. She counted her voice, sharp and precise. Every dollar spent repairing a building slated for demolition is a dollar wasted. That girl is an emotional variable in a multi-billion-dollar project. You broke protocol. You got personally involved with a line item, Declan, and now you're seeing the messy consequences. I got involved because I saw a human being, not a variable, he thundered, his voice echoing in the silent office. And now she can damage us. Genevieve pressed on her eyes, narrowing. She can go to the press. A story about the big bad billionaire who kicks a sick kid and his hard-working sister out of their mold-infested home. It writes itself. Your grand anonymous gesture has backfired and put a target on our back. A thin, cruel smile touched her lips. Is it really the company you're worried about, Declan? Or is it this one particular girl who reminded you of some old bedtime story about your mother? The personal jab struck home, confirming his deepest fears. Genevieve saw his flicker of humanity, not as a strength, but as a fatal flaw. We are going to fix this, Declan said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. We are going to contact every displaced tenant from that block and offer them a new comprehensive compensation package, a real one. That would be admitting guilt. It would open us up to lawsuits, to a full-blown media circus, she argued, aghast. The correct strategic move is to control the narrative. We get ahead of the story. There is no narrative to control, he shot back. There is only the truth. And the truth is we were wrong. He leaned over her desk, their faces inches apart. You will do nothing. Do not contact her. Do not engage her or her family. Do not release any statements. I am going to handle this personally and properly. He turned and left her office, the unspoken threat hanging in the air between them. But as he walked away, Declan failed to see the look in Genevieve Dubois' eyes. It wasn't defiance, it was resolve. In her mind, he was compromised, his judgment clouded by a dangerous sentimentality. He was about to sacrifice a corporate empire for one girl. She had spent 15 years of her life helping him build that empire, and she would not let him tear it down out of a sudden fit of conscience. She had to save the company, and Declan, from himself. Alone in her glass-walled office, she picked up her private cell phone. She scrolled through her contacts to a name saved only as Vulture. A notorious freelance journalist with a talent for character assassination and a complete lack of ethics. She pressed the call button. I have a story for you, Genevieve said, her voice smooth as silk. An exclusive. It's about a very clever waitress and a very generous billionaire. It seems a certain young woman in Boston has found a lucrative new way to handle an eviction notice. Yes, an opportunist. She discovered the identity of the developer, a man known for his private philanthropy. Oh, he was trying to help her, of course, anonymously. But she saw an opening and manufactured a confrontation to extort him. Yes, a real sob story. I can give you a few sources in her old neighborhood who were never very fond of her. Let me send you the details. She ended the call and stared out at the city. It was a necessary evil, a surgical strike to neutralize a threat. In 2 days, the narrative wouldn't be about a cruel developer. It would be about a cunning, greedy waitress. The company would be safe, and Declan, she reasoned, would eventually thank her for protecting him from his own weakness. The tabloid article was a digital wildfire, and Lucienne was at its center, burning. The first casualty was her job. When she called Mr. O'Malley, his voice, usually a gruff but friendly baritone, was strained and distant. "Lucienne, kid, I'm sorry," he began, the sound of clattering dishes in the background. "I know it's a load of garbage, I do. But I've got reporters sniffing around the front door. My regulars are complaining. People are taking pictures of the place. Business is down. It's just not a good look right now." "So I'm fired?" Lucienne asked, her voice hollow. A long, painful pause. "Just take some time off, okay? A few weeks. Let this all blow over." But they both knew it was a severance, not a vacation. She hung up the dial tone, buzzing in her ear like a mocking insect. She was radioactive. The story had done its job perfectly, twisting her from a victim into a villain, a nobody who had tried to play in the big leagues and gotten burned. The penthouse, once her clean-air sanctuary, now felt like a glass prison cell on public display. Every window felt like an eye watching her. Every comfort, the soft sheets, the filtered water, the silent air felt like a prop in the drama of her humiliation evidence for the prosecution. She and Leo existed in a state of suspended animation. They kept the blinds drawn. The television remained off. The silence was broken only by the incessant toxic chime of notifications on Lucienne's phone as strangers from across the globe weighed in to call her a gold digger, a parasite, a fraud. She finally powered it down, severing her last link to the outside world. Days blurred into a single grey expanse. Lucienne found herself staring out at the harbour for hours, watching the boats come and go, tiny vessels of purpose in a vast, indifferent sea. All her fight, the grit that had gotten her through years of hardship, had finally crumbled to dust. "We have to leave," she said one afternoon, her voice a flat whisper that barely disturbed the room's oppressive stillness. She turned from the window to face her brother. "We'll use whatever is left on that debit card the last time, I swear. We'll buy 2 bus tickets to somewhere they've never heard of Declan Roads. We'll find a small town. I'll get a job waitressing. You'll finish school. We'll change our names. We'll just disappear." Leo wheeled his chair closer, his young face set with a gravity that belied his age. "No." The single word was so firm, so absolute, it startled her. "No," she repeated, bewildered. "That's what they want, Lucienne. That's the whole point of an attack like this. It's designed to make you run. They knock you down, and they expect you to stay down, to crawl away in shame, so they never have to think about you again." He reached out and took her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "You're not like that. I've watched you my whole life. You're the person who carries 100-pound boxes in the pouring rain because you have to. You're the person who works a double shift and then comes home to read to me when I'm sick. You don't give up. Don't let them make you." His faith in her was a painful, beautiful thing. It was the version of herself she no longer recognized. Before she could answer the private elevator, chimed a sound so alien in their self-imposed isolation that they both flinched. The polished steel doors slid open. Declan Rhodes stood there. He looked like a man who had been through a war. His expensive suit was rumpled, his tie was gone, and his usually immaculate hair was dishevelled, as if he'd been running his hands through it for hours. Dark circles shadowed his grey eyes, and in them Lucien saw not power or pity, but a profound and gut-wrenching shame. He held a tablet, its screen alive, with the garish headline of the article that had ruined her. "Lucien," he said, his voice raw, "I am so sorry. I never wanted this. I never imagined it could come to this." A bitter, cold fury, the first real emotion she'd felt in days, surged through Lucien. "Save it," she snapped, turning her back on him to face the window again. "Your apology doesn't unprint the lies. It doesn't give me my job back. It doesn't erase my name from the gutter of the internet. Your money and your words, they're worthless here." "I know," he said, taking a hesitant step into the room. The elevator doors slid silently shut behind him, trapping them together. "I know words are not enough. They're empty. That's why I'm here." Geneviève Dubois orchestrated this. She went behind my back, using my resources to protect a bottom line she thought I cared more about than people. As of 9 o'clock this morning, she no longer works for my company. Lucien turned slowly, a flicker of shock cutting through the fog of her despair. "You fired her. I fired the philosophy that allowed someone like her to thrive," he said, his voice gaining a hard edge of conviction. "For years I've been running my business on autopilot, looking at the world from 50 floors up. I forgot that the lines on my maps were streets where people lived. The properties on my spreadsheets were homes. The bottom line became a god, and I let it hollow out the soul of my company. I let it become something my mother, who scrubbed floors on her hands and knees, would have been utterly ashamed of. And in doing so, I let it hurt you. 3 times. First with the eviction notice that I was too detached to even know about. Then with my clumsy, arrogant attempt to fix it with money. And finally with this despicable public execution." He crossed the room to stand beside her, not looking at the view, but at its reflection in the glass, where he could see both her and himself. "When I saw you that night in the rain, Lucien, you weren't a project. You were a mirror. You showed me what real strength looked like, and you reminded me of the man I was supposed to have become. But I was still thinking like a billionaire. I thought I could solve a human problem with a financial transaction. I tried to erase your struggle to pave over it with luxury instead of honoring it." He finally turned to face her directly, his gaze unflinching. "I cannot take back what has been done. The words are out there. The damage is real. But I can try to build something better on the ruins. I'm holding a press conference this afternoon at 3 o'clock. I've invited every major news outlet in the city. I'm going to tell them the truth. All of it. About the Elm Street acquisitions, the deplorable conditions of the building, the eviction. About seeing you in the alley and why I gave you this apartment out of a misguided sense of duty. And I'm going to read them Genevieve's termination letter, which details her role in planting that disgusting story." Lucien was speechless, her mind struggling to process the scale of what he was proposing. He was willing to publicly humiliate himself and his own company. But that's not enough, he continued, his voice resonating with a newfound purpose. "An apology without action is just manipulation. The profits from the Phoenix Towers project are considerable. I'm taking every last dollar of my personal return and seeding a new independent foundation. It will be called the Darcy Foundation." Lucienne flinched at the sound of her own name. No. Don't put my name on it. I don't want anything from you. It has to have your name, he insisted, his tone gentle but firm. Not as a gift to you, but as a permanent reminder, to me and to this entire city, of the human cost of reckless development. It's a name that will represent the person who was wronged and the standard we now have to meet. He took a deep breath. Its sole purpose will be to provide ethical, compassionate, and dignified relocation and housing for residents displaced by urban renewal, not just from my projects, but from any project in this city. It will provide financial aid, legal counsel, job placement, and mental health support. It will be run by social workers, housing advocates, and community leaders, people who understand the struggle, not by corporate executives who see it as an inconvenience. He paused, and his next words changed everything. And I want you to help me run it, Lucienne. Not as an employee drawing a salary, as a partner. I want you to be the director of community advocacy. You'll have a permanent voting seat on the board of directors. You will have the power, the budget, and the authority to veto any action you believe is unjust. You will be the conscience of the entire operation. You will ensure that what happened to you and your neighbors never ever happens to another family in this city again. Lucienne stared at him, the world tilting on its axis for the second time in as many months. This wasn't guilt money. This wasn't a penthouse to keep her quiet. This was power. The power to fight back. He wasn't offering her a comfortable life. He was offering her a cause forged in the fire of her own pain. She looked from Declan's earnest, pleading face to her brother, who was watching them with wide, hopeful eyes. She thought of the dripping ceiling, the indifferent landlord, the fear of homelessness, the humiliation of the article. He was offering her a chance to transmute all that suffering into something meaningful. It was not a fairy tale ending. Trust was a ruin that would need to be rebuilt brick by painful brick. The path ahead would be fraught with public scrutiny and immense challenges. But for the first time since she'd opened that mysterious envelope, she felt a sense of agency. She was no longer a pawn in his world. He was asking her to be a queen in her own. A long, heavy silence filled the room. Then slowly, Lucienne gave a single, deliberate nod. "Okay, Declan," she said, her voice quiet, but ringing with a strength she thought she had lost forever. "Okay, let's build something." In the end, this wasn't just a story about a billionaire and a waitress. It was a story about visibility. It's about the people we walk past every day, the silent battles they fight, and the profound impact of seeing someone in their moment of struggle and choosing to act. Lucienne's story reminds us that true generosity isn't just about writing a check. It's about offering dignity, respect, and a genuine opportunity to heal and grow. Declan's journey shows us that it's never too late to reconnect with your own humanity, to take responsibility for the consequences of your actions, and to use your power to lift others up instead of displacing them. Their story, born in a dark alley, ultimately brought light to an entire community. If this story of struggle, surprise, and redemption moved you, please let us know in the comments below. What part of Lucienne and Declan's journey resonated with you the most? Don't forget to hit that like button to help us share more tales of compassion and unexpected connection. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story. Thank you for listening.